Hi, I'm Kate Bowler. I am really excited to be here on the lawn at UVA. I'm here for the inaugural Scoper Lecture in Christian Thought.
The Scoper Lecture Series in Christian Thought is an annual series that brings eminent Christian scholars to the university from the arenas of scholarship, from medicine, from the arts, and culture.
Nancy and I are very excited about having Kate Bowler as our first speaker. Her books are just phenomenal and really speak to the heart.
This lecture is special to me because I get to have a minute to think about the kind of Christian virtues we need now in this very strange, distended, mid-post-pandemic moment in which we are not who we were and we're not yet sure who we need to be.
I just think that our world today is one that is confusing for a lot of us in many ways, personally, socially, spiritually, and yet someone like Kate Bowler can come along and make us feel that there is hope in the future.
So this afternoon, I have the privilege of introducing our guest for this inaugural Scoper Lecture in Christian Thought, Dr. Kate Bowler. Sometimes you don't know what's on your bucket list until the opportunity arises. And I am grateful for this beautiful collision of people and places that I love: faith and medicine, UVA and Duke, Durham and Charlottesville. So Kate Bowler is a New York Times best-selling author. She's a podcast host, a TED talker, I think that's what they call it, a historian, and a professor at Duke University. She studies the cultural stories we tell ourselves about success, suffering, and whether or not we are capable of change. She's not only an extraordinary scholar, but a woman with an incredible story. A story maintaining hope and perspective in the face of profound disappointments. Kate Bowler believed that life was a series of unlimited choices until she discovered at the age of 35 that her body was racked with cancer, causing her to think in different terms about the research and beliefs that she had been studying. And out of these experiences was birthed the New York Times bestselling memoir, Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved. And these tell the story of her struggle to understand the personal and intellectual dimensions of the American belief that all tragedies are tests of character. In her latest book, No Cure for Being Human and Other Truths I Need to Hear, Kate says it best. It's hard to give up on the feeling that the life you really want is just out of reach. A beach bodied by summer is coming. A trip to Disneyland around the corner. A promotion on the horizon. Everyone wants to believe that they are headed towards good, better, best. But what happens when that life you hope for is put on hold indefinitely? She beautifully grapples with her diagnosis, her ambition, and her faith as she tries to come to terms with limitations in a culture that promotes anything is possible. She searches for a way forward as she mines the wisdom and absurdity of today's best life now advice industry, which insists on exhausting positivity and on trying to convince us that we can out-eat, out-learn, and outperform our humanness. We are, she says, as fragile as the day we were born. She lives in Durham, North Carolina with her family. She continues to teach do-gooders like me at Duke Divinity School, and she stockpiles anecdotes about the hidden benefits of being from the middle of Canada. Friends, there is so much that can be said about Kate, but what I have come to love most about Kate is her curiosity, her empathy, her humor, and her intentionality. I've come to know Kate as a friend, as a truth teller, an academic, and as a prophet. Kate approaches life with a sobering awe, a unique ability to carry both tears and laughter, all while not falling prey to the skepticism of this world. This afternoon's lecture is called Unfinished, the Wisdom of the Generative Self. I think I'm the thing standing between you and our guests, so without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Kate Bowler to the stage.
All right, that's it. Okay. That's it, guys. I've been prayed for, I've been loved, I've been introduced by someone who not only suffered through me as a first-year professor, but is the kind of soon-to-be doctor that shows up for you in the hospital room. I feel deeply grateful to be this loved. And first time at UVA, and I am blown away. The hospitality, the indomitable Karen, can you just feel the sheer force of her majesty? I was, her board, her partners at Theological Horizons have been so kind in creating the kind of place in which community is really possible. I felt very, very lucky to also then have met the wonderful partners that are making this inaugural lecture possible. Thank you to the beautiful Scoper family. It was a joy meeting you and a raw pleasure to test some ideas before you. It feels strange to be here celebrating our pandemic anniversary together. Isn't that nice? There was a moment there, right, at the beginning, where we felt that surge of collective resolve. We weren't trapped at home in a world remaking Earth plague. We were cutting down on our commute times. Hadn't we always wanted to spend more quality time with our families? There were just silver linings everywhere. Sourdough starters, a lot of ambitious chicken coops and vegetable gardens, just shocking benefits of modern homesteading. Carpe diem, right? You got a Peloton. They figured out where those free weights were in the garage, and now there is an incredible beach body awaiting you by summer. Count your blessings. Hadn't you always wanted to be more present? So here we are, 3 years in, and we want to try. Or maybe, better yet, we are trying to try. That is the difficult to describe feeling about being here at the long end of long years of hemorrhaging pandemic losses. We are reaching for the hope that things do not always have to be as they've been. We want to believe, especially now, that change is possible, that we can be kinder than we've been, more empathetic than we were raised to be, more aware of policies that bring justice to our neighbors, and while we're on the subject of neighbors, less pissy about our actual neighbors. We were hoping, perhaps as Christians or as people wanting to outgrow our worst selves, that each passing year might bring not only any old change, but transformation. We should have been different by now. We should have been sparkling, but we are this. We may feel, as the ancient Roman philosopher Seneca felt, that, quote, "This space that has been granted to us rushes by so speedily and so swiftly that all save a very few find life at the end, just when we were getting ready to live." But trying feels harder than it did before, right? This must be especially hard for Americans to admit. Yes, I'm Canadian, I'll bring it up this early, because Americans are famous for knowing how to try, which is what I hoped that we could talk about today. 3 truths that we need to live like this, trying to try. How we imagined ourselves perhaps as perfectible, how a strain of metaphysical mind power convinced many of us to ramrod our circumstances into perfection through positivity, and how we might make a little more room for the reality of our finitude, our humanity. Okay, so let's start with our perfectibility then, shall we? That feeling we have in the pit of our stomachs that tells us we could be better, we should be better. American culture has popular theories about how to build a life, right? From the Puritans of New England and their advice books to Benjamin Franklin's charts on personal improvement to 19th century New Thought movements and 20th century's explosion of self-help books to our present-day guides on manifesting your wishes. Americans have been the primary consumers of guides to a better self, where the secrets of Stoics or Aztecs or ancestral spirits or Abraham Lincoln to Attila the Hun have been revealed. You can think and grow rich. You can stop apologizing. You can lose weight. You can find your soulmate. You can run with wolves. In short, you can learn to have it all if you will just conquer your limits. There is infinity lurking somewhere at the bottom of your inbox, or in the stack of self-help books on your bedside table. It taunts you as you grip your steering wheel in traffic, attempting your new breathing practice, or in the pre-dawn minutes when you should be working out. If you check your social media feed, the debate has been settled. Yes, you can be perfect. Actually, other people are already living beautiful, effortless, endlessly joyful lives, and it's embarrassing you haven't joined their ranks already. It's very simple. Use this moisturizer. Lose the extra pounds. Have you really given 10% of your income to charity this year? Your grandma needs your card. Have you really forgiven your father? Wait, what about that credit card debt? Did you finish that degree? Oh, your partner thinks you're selfish. And at this very moment, I know you can feel it, but there is a 99% chance that your photos have not been synced to the cloud. And you are at risk of losing them forever. Or what about the real stuff? You cheated, or he did. You can't seem to find the person that you wanted to be with, or be that person yourself. That program or job is a dead end. A friend's addiction is eating you alive. Your dad is losing his memory and is miserable to care for. You wanted to be more, healthier, wealthier, happier, but you're not. Feeling, I feel it all the time, is the weight of what I call the perfectibility paradigm. Try harder, do better, other people are already at the finish line. We have drunk too deeply from the wells of our modern self-help culture. We've taken a very precious truth about faith, that we can grow closer to God and become more fully human, and we have transformed it into a capitalistic imperative. Everything is possible if you attend this seminar or buy these essential oils. Everyone has that cousin. Or commit to a new series of time management strategies. Last week at the airport, I bought a book called The Happy Inbox, entirely unironically. I feel the lure that anything else is just admitting to low self-esteem. We're fine. No, not even that. We are perfect just as we are. Look within. We don't need to be saved at all. Everything we need is already inside of us. So then which one is it? Are we terrible, perfectible, already perfect? I don't imagine before this esteemed crowd and in this beautiful place that I will be able to settle centuries of Christian debate about just how good we are, except that I believe that it is somewhere between two poles, everything and nothing. That perfection is impossible, but transformation isn't. That we can change a bit if we really want to. It is, in fact, precisely our imperfection that keeps us perpetually capable of growing and learning. As philosopher Eric Hoffer in Reflections on the Human Condition writes, nature may attain perfection, but people never do. Quote, there is a perfect ant, a perfect bee, but a person is perpetually unfinished. It is the incurable unfinishedness which sets people apart from other living things. We feel the truth of this from the moment we wake up in the morning, that we need to reach for momentum to sustain a life that is never perfect, but is good enough. So let me then just pause for a moment and admit to you how wild and culturally inappropriate it would be if you were going to say these kinds of things at parties, if you were going to declare to a friend, to a neighbor, I'll make it a Pentecostal service, find your friend, turn to your neighbor and say, I am not living my best life now, right? Wouldn't that? It is an incredible phrase, isn't it, best life now? It was, I know that you wanted to know this, it was coined in 2004, isn't that wild? Not that old, by televangelist Joel Osteen. Thank you. You are my people. You are my people. But he said it, and then almost overnight, everyone from Oprah to diet gurus to Hallmark movie starlets reached for it as the gold standard. How did you know that you were truly living? I'm living my best life. And you can see the fullness of it then spilling out from your Facebook or Instagram or, God forbid, TikTok account. Do you ever feel like you've reached a point where you can't do it? And I think for me, it's TikTok is the... but how can you tell? We all have these friends. Landed my dream job, hashtag blessed, hashtag dreams, hashtag too blessed to be stressed. Surfing in New Zealand, again, does it ever get old? Or like the ultimate relationship prosperity gospel. Happy anniversary, honey. You're my everything, my soulmate. Hashtag blessed. It is also apparently the only correct answer on every reality show, or the only correct answer if you run into an ex-boyfriend and they coo, but how are you? I'm living my best life now, Matthew. No explanation required. I did once see, not that long ago, like a yacht, not a super yacht, because those are being seized now, but a yacht, and on the side, the christening name was too blessed to be stressed. And I was like, for you? Okay. That seems, I'll give you that. But the great triumph of the Best Life Now paradigm was that it neatly summarized the promises of an entire multi-billion-dollar wellness industry. Everything is possible if you will only believe. And you can find that confident message anywhere from megachurches, my specialty, to Burning Man, not my specialty, from Peloton to Goop, to your local hot yoga studio, where a woman really, really, really wants to explain manifesting to you, but that good vibes are big business. It is a roughly $12 billion a year industry defined by the theory that we can be perfected, we can organize ourselves, heal ourselves, budget ourselves, love ourselves, and eat ourselves whole. It has become perhaps the dominant mode about how we think about what we're capable of inside of a day, a week, a year. Can we conquer this project called the self? It, in fact, became the dominant American publishing genre, such a juggernaut that, in fact, the New York Times in 1984 just gave up. And they're like, fine, we will just make a list for it. We will have books, and then we will have those books. And it will be called self-help / sometimes recipes / miscellaneous. And where every good habit can then be given a cheap paperback with the potential to become a fully orbed commercial industry backed by clinical stamps of approval. For my amusement and yours, I made a spreadsheet, as is my way, of all of the bestsellers over the last 30 years because I was a little bit curious about what happened during the pandemic. Don't you think, she wondered. I like the width of this. This is nice. Don't you think now might be a nice time to question our rabid stories of American individualism, our sense that our shared health outcomes are not, for instance, corporate, that surely in the midst of a crippling earth plague that we might challenge this dominant cultural hyper-individualistic framework? No, you say? You're right. Yes, no. They were as popular as ever before. Sales were up for books like The High Five Habit, in which you too, did you know someone can invent a high five? It's a remarkable It's a remarkable thing. But modernity it's a fever dream, promising infinite choices and unlimited progress, that we can be young forever, successful forever, agents of our own perfectibility. We will fall in love with Tony Robbins and Eckhart Tolle and Joyce Meyer and Rachel Hollis. And women will better themselves with Weight Watchers points and Kim Kardashian waist trainers and the right shade, if you're still into it, of Mary Kay lipstick. But men would have to save like Dave Ramsey, or learn the habits of highly effective people, or flip a tire or two at CrossFit. The American admiration for bootstrappers and optimists became this capitalistic paradise. So instead of the televangelists that I study on Sunday morning, everyone became a televangelist of good, better, best. Your salvation is just a decision away. Will you finally let it save you? If you've ever felt like a failure for not being able to fix your life, well, welcome. Welcome to the cost of the perfectibility paradigm, which makes it very difficult for us to do this, to tell the truth about life without perfection. Because by now, 3 years in, it is our anniversary, after all, we have all had befores and afters. That there was a life before, remember? Like the sun rose and life buzzed, but it didn't blur. That breakfast was consumed and there was always an errand that needed to be done across town. There was a solvability. And then there's the life after, and it comes for us at different times. After your parents' divorce, or yours, after your mom's death, after an injury, after pain became depression, and depression became something else entirely. After the pandemic, after and after and after. For me, that moment came when a physician's assistant called me in my office and told me that what I thought was like a gallbladder gone wonky was in fact stage 4 cancer, and that I would have to walk over to the hospital right away. And I'll never forget that feeling where there was like that second where you're suspended between those two worlds, right, of your before and after. And I thought, I had a good run there for a minute. And then there's the life after, the life where you can't go back, the one you just have. Sometimes, Taylor Harris, who we're going to talk to tomorrow, is also a UVA person. She has this gorgeous thing in her last book. She says, and here's the thing about afters, is sometimes they can last forever. It's so good. I think most commonly our culture, it's so sad that I assume that I'm never gonna cry again, and that my tear ducts broke or something. It's allergies. But if anyone has a Kleenex, I just want you to know. Karen, of course Karen has a Kleenex. Oh my gosh, did you throw that? I love that. Gosh, I'll take that. That's so great. Oh my gosh. I feel like in my life I'll never get roses, I'll always get Kleenex, thrown onto the stage. That makes me so happy. Oh my God. But there's a thing we do now in the after, and our cultural reflex is the second thing I wanted to talk about, which is the reflex of positivity. And we might assume that positive thinking is always the helpful tool for anyone attempting to navigate their life after. Because we all have that friend, right? The person who just always gets back up, like human whack-a-mole, right? And if you'd seen me in my after, you might imagine that was me. That I just like a Tigger, it honestly looked like I had signed the waiver for a reality show that I didn't realize that I was starring in, and I was so excited to have stage 4 cancer, just really pretty pleased about it. Because the kind of positive thinking that we're talking about is different than optimism or hope. Because the roots of our reflexes about positive thinking are long and tangled, but they're inextricable from ways of thinking that really developed in the late 19th century. So just picture, Civil War has ended, Americans are swept up in confidence about the progress and potential perfectibility of the human race. They are experimenting with new technologies, like the telegraph, electric light, things that seem to them to make invisible causalities visual suddenly, or religious movements like mesmerism or forms of spiritualism, things that seem to connect people with invisible spiritual planes, and people start to think, well, maybe our minds are more powerful incubators than we imagined, and so there'll be different frameworks for it, but the Christian one, which becomes the most popular, goes like this. We would Sunday school well, I feel. So what does God do when God creates and God says, let there be light, and there is? And what did God do? Spoke it, right, into existence. And perhaps then our words create power that acts sort of like boomerangs, like what goes out then returns back. And it's that causal mechanism that begins to feel intuitive in the American mind. So we become real incubators for many, many forms of what in the 50s and 60s with Norman Vincent Peale is named positive thinking, but it goes by all kinds of different names. Mind cure, mental magic, affirmations. Kids these days, manifesting. Manifesting is mad, guys. But what it does is it creates a very, like in religious language, we would use a very high anthropology, like an inflated sense of what humans are capable of. Then reinforcing the incorrect belief that whatever good things are then come back to you, and what negativity may also then be your fault. So if you want to play this game with me. Always go into your local Target, I beg of you. Go into the nonfiction section, and you can play the game. What here is not mental magic, and I will win this game. I want you to think of me every time. You will find The Secret. You'll find some modern iteration of Think and Grow Rich. You will always find a blonde woman with a book called something like The Universe Has Your Back. Every now and then I do like a ruin a self-help game where I just change a couple words, and what would be your bestseller, and mine would always be The Universe Stabbed You in the back. You just add a couple little like bonus words for your memoir. But the bottom line is that our culture began to believe through the sheer force of optimism that any righteous, right-believing, hardworking person can then overcome any obstacle. So then, rather than, it's a kind of an account of civil religion, that rather than sacralizing the American dream, it begins to render sacred Americans. It deifies, it ritualizes their hunger, their hard work, and moral fiber. And if you don't believe me, which of course you do, you're deeply convinced at this moment, I just want you to think back to a moment, the last time you tried saying something hard to someone else, and it didn't, and you could feel it not land. That person either wouldn't or couldn't, or they immediately wanted to rush in. And we already know what they rush in with. Let's not be negative, right? Let's just think about your mindset. Don't put that out into the universe, right? These are boomerang theologies. Don't make that true. These are always nice woods here, I imagine. Yeah, no veneers, not for UVA. But yes, a lot of intense, and sometimes it looks like superstition, but what it really is you're feeling the social cost of that cultural prohibition against negative speech and the depth of American cultural assumptions about the power of the mind. Surely we have all met people whose positivity then prevented them from seeing the world as it is, from accepting bad news, or from managing grief, from processing complicated truths. I used to, I just ruined my 20s and interviewing televangelists, traveling the country. I was very, very driven, unusually driven to do that. Well, I spent a long time interviewing people for whom life and God seemed especially good. But I also interviewed a large number of people who were there at those rallies, there at those healing crusades, waiting for their miracle. And watched over and over again how the insistence that God could and that God is good devolved into the insistence that God must, or else anything else is impossible, that good things will always come back to you, that nothing is impossible if you believe. It reminds me of there was this very unusual, tragic story of a very famous televangelist, A.A. Allen, whose claims to resurrect the dead had to be stopped by the U.S. postal system because people took him at their word and began mailing him bodies that choked up the mail. There are, of course, versions of death denial that seem very extreme, and then there's the million milder reframing and mindset that drive us into pretending that our minds, our positive attitudes are always the sole drivers of our experience, because we're many things, right? We are minds and bodies and spirits and healthcare plans and experiences of social and racial inequality and the neighborhoods we live in and our family systems and whether or not the number one cause of bankruptcy in this country is medical bills. Yes, it is. But we are not simply mental machines. Positive thinking in this version is a form of false resilience. That refusal to admit the limits of our bodies and our minds, it perverts our understanding of hope and makes hope into a kind of illness, one born of love, right, but an illness all the same. It makes us lie because it forces us to pretend that the best is always yet to come. It's that kind of double tyranny. And I've always thought of it as sort of the great, terrible American magic trick, the way that we transform tragedy into failure. The truth is, most wishes, even good wishes, will not always come true. It's not fatalism, it's just the world as it is. The second I got sick, that always felt like the best prayer. God, just let me see the world as it is. All that crystalline beauty. But when you're sitting in the infusion center, you want to see it all. Because if you don't, you'll miss it. Like the way somebody smooths someone's hair, or the delicacy of it all. But God, let me see the world as it is. I can think of no more loving prayer for when we're going through something impossible, that we can sort of slough off the exhausting burden of enforced positivity, get up tomorrow, and do our best life now. When we stop reducing our language to instruments of pure positivity, then we get to do the hard work of honesty and nuance. And when then we see that we can set aside enforced positivity and the illusion of perfectibility, then we have this. Precarity. Such a lovely, I love those delicious words. It's from the Latin precarious, right? Contingency, given out of favor, but then could be withdrawn. From that we get the term, right? It's for insecurity, what is shaky and uncertain. And we know it in our bones because on this pandemic anniversary, we already know that we are just a single accident or disease or missed opportunity or errant virus away from losing things we can't get back. It's a lovely description, beautiful description of our ineluctable fragility in Jeremy Taylor's 1651 classic with the jazzy title, The Rules and Exercises of Holy Dying. But he writes, "We are a vapor, a fantasy, an appearance, or barely that. No, we're like a tale that is told, a dream, or worse, like the fading memory of a dream on waking. And that somehow is very good news for us. Catholic anti-poverty activist, who I'm sure you already know, Dorothy Day, said something wonderful about precarity. She said, in this culture of autonomy and invincibility, that in fact that our precarity is not the problem. It's not what we have to escape or overcome. It is simply the wonderful and terrible contingency which forces us to depend on God and one another. That we like to pretend that our lives are marked by consistency and durability, but more often these experiences are just a season where we move back and forth between those moments of invincibility and moments of utter dependency. Because these are the days we have and the lives we have where life is a chronic condition. Sometimes I feel like I've just got the Gospel of the Dread Pirate Roberts. Do you remember that, The Princess Bride? Right, where he says, life is pain, highness. And anyone who says differently is selling something. Which makes sense, because I'm always in an essential oils presentation. But if we act with the knowledge that our efforts unspool and we come undone, I think something really lovely happens. I got the opportunity this last week, so sorry, this is all a little fresh and bright in my mind, but I got the chance last week to go back to a place I never thought I'd get to see again. And so my parents are here today. They're absolutely adorable. That one is Karen and that one is Jerry. They made me, thank you so much. It took 9 months. It really took almost a year to make me. Thank you. They have some beautiful friends here at UVA, which they brought and are a complete delight, and organized a reunion around coming here, which is so nice. They're part of that incredible Semester at Sea program that was run out of UVA, you know that? Where there's a lot of students being briefed on the limits of alcohol consumption at each port. Do you remember this? Remember that one? But you know, we're from the, this is being recorded, right? The garbage part of Canada, right in the middle, the garbage part of Canada. You heard me, Manitoba. I love Manitoba. But it meant that when they had a chance to go like camel riding and salsa dancing, et cetera, and leave Manitoba for a stretch, they were gonna take it. And so they stopped at the Seychelles Islands but when they came to Lisbon in Portugal, the boat docked, and my husband and I went for a chance to celebrate our anniversary, our 10-year anniversary. And at that moment, I was just the opportunity for just another year of life. So we wanted to take a day trip inland to see one of the crown jewels of Catholic Portuguese architecture. It's the towering Batalha Monastery. And so I'm a historian and my dad's a historian, so this is always like peak bonding time for us. And so we're sort of wandering the sumptuous hallways and pausing before the main sanctuary, and I noticed my dad, he has this nice long stride, and then he's got his arms folded and he's looking up and just awestruck by something. So I come and stand and look at it up with him, and we pause for a moment, and he says, "Horrible, isn't it?" Are we looking at stone pineapples? And indeed we were. We were looking at hundreds upon hundreds of stone pineapples, because Portuguese late Gothic architecture, the Manuelian period, has sort of like the high water mark of adding doodly dads onto everything. And so you take an otherwise already sort of florid time period, and then you add pineapples. So I looked more closely and realized that there was hundreds and hundreds of pineapples, and then they're not just one angel, but like 2,000 angels, and then a stone webwork. And so I was like, yep, he's got this joyful disgust, and then of course we both love ruining things. And so I said, first after noticing it looked like an explosion, hey, let's go look at what else the Portuguese can ruin. So we were in this massive octagonal chapel, just vaulted, spectacularly ornamented, and it was just fussy and beautiful and ridiculous. And I heard this voice muttering nearby, just saying, oh, it's perfect. It's just perfect. And it was, when you know someone is just like ready for sightseeing? It was this older man, and he had like compression socks already on, and like binoculars, and like one of those Tilly hats, with like, as if someone's gonna need fishing apparatus just in case, and like belts on belts. And he was just sort of fluttering about, absolutely in rapturous awe. And I was so busy being a jerk that I didn't notice that I was looking at the ground, and that just a shadow snaked by. And then I looked up, and I realized that there were clouds. And the man beside me was just like right up, just keeping pace, like we're old friends now. And he said, oh, it was never dear. It was never done, dear. Isn't it wonderful? And he gestured at the ceiling where the sky, where the ceiling should have been. And apparently 7 kings had overseen this monument rise and buried its dynasty in its walls, and none had lived to see it finish. So the man tells me, well, the story goes that the plans for the building simply got so drawn out that eventually the idea of finishing it was simply abandoned, but it's much better this way. I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, I couldn't imagine a more perfect image of this life of faith. I came all this way to see it. We're never done, dear. Even when we're done, we're never done. And then my dad strode up, and I was so worried about what he was going to say right when our eyes met. So I was like, Dad, my new friend here was just saying what he liked about this place. And the man explained, and we stood there looking for a bit. I said, I've been thinking. My dad said, I agree, looking at it to give it another stare. It's wonderfully unnecessary, isn't it? So, may we all say now, celebrating our pandemic anniversary together, as we feel the limits of our own efforts and our own undoing, that we bless the truth of this precarity somehow. And with great apologies to the self-help industry, and with appreciation for all the ways that we try and try and try again, we might say, like I did for a minute, looking at the cathedral of my life, that all our masterpieces are ridiculous, and all of our striving unnecessary, and all of our work unfinished and unfinishable. We are and do too much, never enough, and are done before we've even started. Thank you, God. Yes, it's better this way. Thank you, my dears. We'll do some structured Q&A, shall we? Yeah?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brian Colati. I work in the president's office here, and I'm going to introduce our Q&A question askers. But before I do, I just want to say thank you so much, Kate. My wife and I have been reading your book, and she tells me, you're going to laugh a little bit, Brian. You're going to cry a little bit, and you're going to be inspired. And I'm just so excited that I have colleagues here, friends here, and we're going to be able to continue this conversation. So thank you. I've had the privilege of being on the host committee, and so I'd like to just let you all know how the question and answer session is going to go. We have 3 people who are going to ask questions. Dr. Tyson Bell is a critical care and infectious disease doctor here at UVA. He's going to ask our first question on behalf of the medical community here. And then Shelby Gibson is an assistant dean of students here at UVA, and she's going to ask a question representing the faculty and staff community here at UVA. And finally, we have a 4th-year student, Tony Angela, and Tony is studying chemical engineering here at UVA, and she'll ask a question on behalf of the UVA students.
No, I specifically requested dumb questions, so this will not do. He's like, I got you.
All right. So, so I'm tasked with asking you the first half of the medical community. And this question should be thought-provoking and capture an amazing depth of thought and seriousness that's deserving of this esteemed event, your presence, and even that wide podium.
Thank you.
And I promise I'm going to do that before Karen loses it. But first, let me just ask on behalf of everyone here, the question that we're all wondering is, how are you just so amazing?
Come on.
I mean, so please dedicate the first 30 to 45 seconds of your response addressing that question. And then the question I think Karen wants me to ask. One of the words that rung out to me at the beginning of your talk is the saying that we should have been different by now, but we are this. And medical professionals often encounter situations where we hope things would be a certain way, but they aren't. And what we have is this, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
And I remember at the end, you just said, like, and you were in the cathedral, we're never done. And so in that sense, the medical community is never done, and we're never done healing. And then at the beginning, we were talking about how awesome Charlene is. You mentioned a doctor that shows up, which is what she's going to be.
Yeah.
So for you, in this context, what is a doctor, a nurse, a therapist, or other professional that's able to show up in a situation where it is what it is, but it's not what we've hoped?
Yeah, wow. Oh, man, yeah. When everything is structured against an incentive, a set of incentives for anyone to do that. Like I remember interviewing someone whose work was on slow medicine, right? And she was explaining to me how little I understand about your incredible profession, but just how intensely structured every visit and note-taking structure would be against the kind of slow work of making room for the ambiguity in which it costs everybody a little bit. Because for me, the most beautiful moments are always when I can feel the weight of the situation settle a little bit on all of our shoulders. There's not the speedy exit. There's not and I'll send my colleague in right now with your paperwork kind of moment. And it never happens with the pain scale at the beginning, right? It's never that. It's never that moment. It's when we can feel it together, just sometimes the intractability of what's happened. So I think my very favorite people, nurses, doctors, blood workers, intake people, is just when you get just a half a second of acknowledgement about what it means. I'll never forget moments before a scan when someone might just pause for just a half a breath and say, this must be really hard. Or even just the nice little, but do you have any questions? Like sometimes it's just like, do any of the words I just said mean anything to you? Are we both using words right now? Yeah, so I'm just, because the ministry of your presence is the great gift. I know it feels like it's supposed to be the solution that you bring. I know doctors and healthcare providers are they're forced to be answer machines, solution machines, and it's not fair. It's not fair. So bless you in all the ways that you pay a little bit of the cost of the visit. I'm so grateful for moments like that. And even when it can't be solved, it meant something that, because I heard a doctor the other day, an ER doctor, describe himself, and it was a moment, he was trying to, not to be a jerk, he was trying to absolve himself for a second. He was making a comment about how he never goes to funerals. Like, I understand people are busy, but he gets invited to funerals all the time of people he's declared dead. He said, well, I'm just a tourist. And I could tell, I know how important language is, right? For him to say, like, I didn't mean to be in all of this. But I guess I love it when someone pauses for a second just to say, I promise I'm not a tourist. Yeah. Thanks for your gorgeous question. Hey guys.
Thank you for that. Hi, everyone. Hi. I'm Tony Ajala. I'm a fourth-year chemical engineering major.
Amazing.
So my question for you is, first of all, as a preface, I detest binaries. So thinking about your how you phrase that human existence is existing between everything and nothing. And I guess my question is, does it serve people to think of themselves as existing between everything and nothing? Or is it better to experience life as a continuum, as a spectrum?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the everything and nothing refers to like the American obsession with agency language. So I think we're sharing the same hope, is that the obsession with we must be everything or else we are nothing is what is creating this kind of brinksmanship in people's self-help life. And so often self-help is the available set of tools and resources people have when they're experiencing tremendous fragility. So my hope is that they feel not pressed toward an everything as possible, nor kind of pushed off into the potential nihilism of nothing as possible, but that they feel that they feel the kind of like an expanding set of lungs, that sometimes it might feel like there's more and sometimes there's less, but that we shouldn't be, that this language we're given doesn't feel like we're over revving every engine and then therefore going to careen off the road. Yeah. Also, please explain chemical engineering. You say you're in chemical engineering? It's really, I'm already super impressed. Thank you.
Ooh, first of all, having to go after Dr. Bell and Tony is a challenge, but I'm Shelby Gibson. I'm an assistant dean of students here at the university. Awesome. And again, tasked with the task of speaking on behalf of faculty and admin. No pressure at all. I asked Karen when she emailed me to do this, how existential can I be in my question?
Well, I imagine you've seen so much in the last few years about people's raw needs.
Yes, my job is often best described as I sit with folks on maybe the worst day of their life so far, sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's a tremendous privilege.
Yeah.
So in that way, the student affairs or higher ed version of this idea that you talk about in all of your work is the idea of resilience or grit. There are books and research studies about it. You may be familiar with the grit scale. There's a lot of context around that folks have rightfully discussed, and how that maybe privileges folks who have to develop that as a skill rather than just have that as part of their life when they get to college. Maybe that's part of their story before they get here based on their circumstances or the context of the world based on the identities that they hold.
Yeah.
But one thing that I've noticed in my career as an administrator and now as a doctoral student who studies college students is a profound lack of gentleness in the way that we talk about resilience, in the way that college students view themselves and the amount of things that they're expected to accomplish in their 4 or 5 years while they're in school.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what your thoughts with respect to that would be in terms of how can we invite ourselves, our students, our community into a gentler form of resilience, and what that can look like.
Wow, yeah. And sorry, before you go, don't you dare leave me here.
I would never. I'm here.
Do you think that what do you think people expect of themselves when they, like, if someone decides that a response is resilient or not? What qualities are they hoping to embody?
Yes. There is a class actually at UVA on resilience, and with great respect to Tim Davis, who teaches the class. It's a great class, but it's something that is sort of taught as a skill and discussed between administrators of our students need to improve their resilience so they will not complain about how far away the laundry room is from their room. When in reality, that may be a really profound distillation of what resilience is. And a lot of our students, I would imagine students at Duke or Chapel Hill or really any college, expect perfection from not only their academic performance, but their ability to balance it all.
Yeah.
And I've seen more and more students, especially in the last 3 years, who come in my office and sit down and they're like, I can't do it all.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's too hard.
Yeah.
And I don't know who asked them to do it all. Maybe it's themselves, maybe it's the culture.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that answers your follow-up.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, I just read a lovely book on Dr. Hayter about language for chronic pain. It just kind of is reminding me, it's gonna come out next month, I think, and it's really lovely. But he was talking about the, insert a lot of humanity words describing the medical science, so just forgive when I trail off and hope for grace. But he was describing the subjectivity of pain, or like the pain scale, for example, about what was so frustrating about trying to understand and respond to other people's pain is that so little of it is either measurable or can be objectively rendered. But its subjectivity is not then a reason to dismiss it, that the story that we live inside, the thing that makes it, feel unbearable, is part of what feels to me like the asterisk beside pain, that it will go on forever, that no one wants to hear about it, that I am alone in this. Like the asterisk, I know, is the work that we can do as a community to lessen the acuteness of people's experience of chronic distress, is that when we lower the bar on our exhausting culture of perfectionism, that it'll erode a little bit the asterisks, that know they are not alone, that know that they are not the first person to go through this, and none of that will be minimizing. It will end up being a joy because their humanity will not be a problem. So I think convincing people that their subjective pain is as significant as the measurable, I think would be a really lovely start. Yeah. Oh, hey, goodbye. All right.
Yes, Kate. So after your talk yesterday, I woke up like in the middle of the night with a question for you, and I'm so grateful to be able to ask it. This idea of disappointment and forcing reimagining of care, the idea of disappointment forcing for all of us relearning and seeing the before and the after. I'm just so curious to hear you talk about like how you have reimagined God, as a Christian, like how you have reimagined Christ and the act of Christ in your life. That's a big question, and I would appreciate hearing kind of where you are in that reimagining.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, I guess, and maybe we have different theological questions when we're in the midst of, when we're in the fire, and then when we're just smoldering a little bit afterwards. But in the crisis of it, for me, the great unfairness was what I was grappling with. Just the why God do you seem to have such a high tolerance for evil? Why, after having studied miracle healing rallies for a decade, wouldn't you make yourself a little bit more plausible? I mean, why should I have to work this hard as a Christian to see evidence of your work in the world? I mean, if I could offer a few revisions, I would suggest something a little more obvious. Why do all your people seem convinced that they have to hype man you, stand beside you, explain to me how great heaven's going to be in order to make sense of my world for me as it is unraveling? I think the weaponized piety of the incredibly certain, if I wasn't a Christian before, that would have just leveled me. So for I guess the first bit, it was just why God, because am I not good somehow? Is my body not good? How do I picture this? Especially cancer. Like it's in me. It's kind of awful as a metaphor. It's still my body, but it's trying to murder me. Is it like a narcoleptic killer who's just asleep somewhere in the house, or do I need to get out? It was emotionally very confusing. But I think it became, it became something different when I let go more of the deep and misguided hope that I'd had that my Christian life would add up in the way, I was good. I mean, I know you're not supposed to say that as a Christian, but I was like a pretty good Christian. I was nice to strangers, and then when none of it would add up. I'm reading this lovely book right now. Dr. Sam Wells, he used to be dean of the chapel at Duke, and now he's at St. Martin in the Fields in London. But he has it's like a beautiful systematic theology, but it's reread as less about God being like, here's the instrumental ways that God works. He saves us from our sins. And granted, I am thrilled about all the four, but the God being with is the God that I've loved, the God that is in the warmth of the hand that always reaches out to hold mine after I'm wheeled into a surgery, and the one who is in my son's unbelievably uninterrupted childhood in the midst of pain, and the love that I now get to enjoy, when we get to talk about all of this, being people together. That to me is radically revised how I think about the God of presence, and that is God's great book of Job miracle, is that when all things are removed, God will be there. Even if we ask, where were you when the foundations of the earth were laid, right? God asks that. And we know he was there. So yeah, I guess presence has been where I landed.